Here we go. Okay.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, you guys. How's your volume, Victor?
How is my volume? Testing, check. Maybe a bit
It
higher?
works. It works.
It works? All right.
Everyone, we
Beautiful.
are so excited to announce. Hold your applause, please. Episode 200, which is a special number because it's round.
Yeah.
Yay.
Congratulations to the
I'm
Pill
applauding
Pod.
by myself. I'm applauding by myself.
No, we all applaud because we're comrades. We join the applause.
So thank you to you guys. Thank you to our past hosts. Thank you to our patrons for keeping us going. Unfortunately, I have to announce that this is the final episode of the Plastic Pills Philosophy and Critical Theory podcast. I'm sorry.
Long live the king. The king is dead.
200 is the final episode, eh?
200. It seems like a good place to end. We've been trying for 3 or 4 years to pretend like philosophy still exists. Philosophy is in the subtitle of our podcast. But I'm done. No, you laugh. I'm done. This is a simulation. I'm done pretending that philosophy is something. I did my research this week. This was my fault, I guess. I thought we would catch up on America, like current America, and that was a big mistake. While studying philosophy and trying to make content of philosophy, all of that is based on what? The secret truth, the love of wisdom, and if we look under the surface where real reality is, then we have it. We have it on display. Thank you, America. If you understand it, you can master it. We failed.
Cool.
Damn pills.
I mean, is that new though? I feel like you've said on this podcast many times that philosophy is dead or not real. What's changed?
It's just me acknowledging it. I was
Okay.
admitting it while in denial. Now I admit it. The world
Okay.
is not made of wisdom. So the love of wisdom, what does that get you?
yeah.
No, the world is made of belief and what Diego likes to call material conditions, whatever those are. But it's clear you can just believe whatever you want now. It's 2025. Good job. We had a good run. Philosophy, we're taking it out of the subtitle.
Really? We're really taking it out?
We're doing clicks now. That's us.
Nice. I like it.
There it is.
One of my best friends from Spain, which has the most PhDs and titles in philosophy that I have ever knew, also retired from philosophy, and now he's just like writing weird poetry. And the guy stopped, and he even participated in a lot of political movement in Spain. And he's like a young guy that was concerned by everyone in philosophical circles in Spanish-speaking worlds as the next big promise in philosophy. And the guy said something very similar to what Pils just said. And he said, even specifically talking about politics, he said that politics is post-philosophical, like post-ideological. They don't even need philosophy anymore, as they don't need ideologies anymore.
Well, what kind of brings this on is I looked into one of Badiou's second manifesto for philosophy, and he's like, guys, we have to pull it together. It's falling apart. It's being replaced by PR. And yeah, 5 seconds of the news and PR is reality. Wisdom is not reality. You can't master the world right now by understanding it.
So we're done trying to understand the world. It's time to change it, maybe?
Oh, my sweet summer child.
Oh, I saw that movie too.
Finally, are we past Hegel? Oh my God, finally.
Oh, the young Marx. I think he was drunk in an alley when he said that. Supporting himself with Engels' more solid constitution.
I had to. I'm sorry. It was just too clear.
Yeah, he said that while he was pissing against a wall. So, what is philosophy except pissing against a wall for a decade?
I guess.
Or getting drunk.
I guess.
I mean, isn't that the origins of it? The symposiums, they would all go get wasted and feast and yell at each other. And then Plato would edit the text to make it sound good.
And flash
Good fun.
Plato didn't understand what we know. He thought that knowledge was the key, like there was a secret in reality. And if we could unlock that secret. Only a few could. But if they could, they would have mastery over the secret and over knowledge. But we know everything. We know everything there is to know, and we just sit here and blink. Yeah, I guess it's a hobby. We can keep doing it as a hobby.
Yeah, I guess that's why the Romans didn't really make their own philosophy. They just took all the Greeks, said, "This is fucking good enough. Let's build an army now," and then the rest is history.
I guess my question would be, why would anybody have ever thought? I don't know if this is something you used to believe, Pills, but I guess I never believed that philosophy was like, you know, here to uncover like special hidden truths or like, you know, I mean, I wouldn't quite say that it was like it was like a self-enriching like preoccupation.
Do you feel enriched?
That's what I would call it. I feel more enriched for it. Yeah.
I guess that's the difference between us this week.
Yeah, I mean, at least, I mean, I'm not saying that, but I guess like I never went into it. So it's just interesting to think. I mean, I guess I have known some people who have gone into philosophy, and it's kind of clear that they're there to try to unlock like some profound mystery, but that's just never been me. I've never held philosophy to such a high bar.
Philosophy definitely gives you practical skills, the same sort of skills that a literature degree might give you.
I mean, I would argue better than a literature degree, but
hey, fuck you, man.
Haven't all these points being like either discussed, sustained, or dethroned by people before us? Because, like, for example, I have seen several people do like the burial of philosophy. You know, like the how do you call it? Entierro? The burial. Like when you
people
go
try to do that.
Yeah, when you go to the cemetery and like people symbolically they bury books and they say philosophy is dead. You know,
Or even
eulogy.
philosophers who say that we've gone beyond philosophy. This is something new. This is just therapy, like Wittgenstein said. We're not doing philosophy. We're just solving linguistic confusions.
Yeah. This is Nietzsche. This is Heidegger. This is Wittgenstein. This is Baudrillard. It's just a perennial complaint that philosophy
I always
doesn't
just
do
laugh
anything.
because I'm like, you guys are just doing philosophy though. Still, like you're claiming, but it's just I don't know. I just think it's funny. It's just a funny performative gesture.
Is it performative, Pills?
I think it's performative.
I can't say it's not performative.
Well, that's performative is not supposed to be something superficial. Performative
Yeah, exactly.
Is
It's not just
to be,
superficial. Yeah,
no,
something
I understand
that like shapes the essence of who you are through your performance.
Through your performance. Yeah, I understand.
Be a philosopher, live in a barrel in the market.
If
So
someone were
open
doing
sky
that,
masturbation against Alexander the Great that's the answer.
that is respect.
Yeah.
If someone were to sit in the middle of Times Square in a barrel, this would be valuable.
Yeah.
What was
And
the news? What was
philosophize.
the news or the things that you were reading about online that kind of led you especially to this? Do you have any examples? I think that we could laugh at
Or
or
go
cry
back to
at.
Baudrillard's manifesto.
Yeah, I think Baudrillard was far too optimistic.
He's the most nihilistic motherfucker out there.
I think American politicians are the most nihilistic. Both sides of the aisle. But we have Trump and his new. I love his picks. I think his picks are perfect for this because you know what did they do in the 60s when they gave up on philosophy? They went to politics. They said politics, that's where the real action is. Or even Marx says stuff like that. We're not going to sit in our ivory tower. We're going to go and do politics. But politics is gone too. Politics is, and it's not even a simulation anymore. I was like coming into this before I watched the news thinking, oh, well, this is a simulation. It's funny. There's so many characters. But it's worse than that. The simulation is over too. We have deluded ourselves into thinking that thinking would provide, I don't know, some comfort, some project, some plan. And if that failed, then we can go to politics because philosophers have only sought to understand the world, but we want to change it. But you can't do that either. The world is ratings. The world is information ratings. And this happened to me, this happened yesterday to me because I saw that I saw that Trump hired the former CEO of the WWE, who was also a character in wrestling. She was like in a wheelchair while her husband cheated on her. She's now in charge of the education of America.
I sent that news to the group. I sent it like a couple of weeks ago. Don't you remember? I said kayfabe just became canon.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I might have missed that one. I don't click on all the links in the chat.
I can tell.
But that's one. And then Dr. Phil going on the ice raid. That was just chef's
insane. Kiss. Yes, beautiful.
But politics being replaced by reality TV is worse than a simulation. Because a simulation president, the simulation has to absorb people's belief. It has to absorb people's faith in something by resembling something. And so this makes like Obama the perfect
simulation president.
He's the perfect simulation president because he's well-spoken, competent, promises change, promises hope, says this
represents
is a new
diversity.
Day. Oh yeah, he's black. That also helps because it's like, we're not racist anymore. So the perfect simulation president. And this is why,
too?
Yeah, and he's a Muslim, of course. And he's born in Kenya. So he was the perfect simulation president. But when the simulation devolves, this is a hypothesis, I'm not sure on this. I only thought of this while I was getting angry at the television. What the simulation has is discordant belief. It's fractured, like when you shoot a pane of glass and it just fractures into, instead of one simulation, it's just literally whatever you want to believe, that's right. So we have the reemergence of every kind of cult, and it's not divided left and right. It's the same across the board. It's cult, it's publicity, and it's a ratings war. And the fact that he hired the WWE president and Dr. Phil, or was Dr. Phil hired? I didn't actually.
No, he was just a consultant. The Minister of Health is Robert Kennedy Jr.
Oh yeah, the vaccine skeptic guy,
the one I interviewed.
These are people who obviously don't know anything about the world, but Trump, The Apprentice, WWE, and Dr. Phil, what they do understand is ratings. Ratings is how you explain the world. You don't understand it through ideas. You don't understand it through the idea of material conditions because those haven't changed in 100 years. You just understand it through media.
I think Trump's literally said that before too. And I know that there was this movie that I actually thought wasn't bad. It came out a few years ago after Trump's first term, and it was about like Comey, like James Comey. And I think, I don't know, some Irish actor actually played Trump, and I thought he did a decent job. And it's like all about his like, and it shows kind of these backroom conversations where Trump was pressuring Comey. And I remember like in one of the scenes, which are based on apparently Comey's notes that he took like right after his meetings, Trump was telling him, he's like, you know who I trust in this world? It's like these politicians. It's like TV people. He's like, because they got to do ratings. He like literally said, he's like, because they have to be responsive to ratings all the time. They have to be like on top of things. Whereas like bureaucrats, it's like, they're just fucking stuck in their swamp and don't have to respond to anything.
That's great. Can I take a jab at it? Because I'm like biting my nails to take a jab at your take.
I want you guys to walk me back from the edge. Is reality just ratings, or is it some deeper understanding that we develop from reading books?
I think understanding kind of like comes too late every time. And it's weird because like, for example, for me, since I do new reviews every week, I'm like bombarded by this infinite amount of bullshit on almost a daily basis. Most of it by desire, which is strange. Like I crave, like I become addicted to this like constant flow of diarrhea coming from everywhere. And like I find myself like creating meaning to it a posteriori, like after I become entangled with the reasoning and the logic in the middle of these things. But one event that really got me interested was the genocide of Palestinian people, which I thought, well, this is too raw. This is too crude. This is too painful. Like the videos we are getting, the amount of information we are getting, the intensity of the genocide, the amount of people being killed, the amount of pain is too much. Like I didn't really believe people will be able to become immune to that suffering. And like I was even being like a little bit too romantic or too hopeful, thinking that, well, maybe some sort of humanity is going to be trigger, connector, or empathize with this harsh reality that now we are getting from social media, from the genocide of the Palestinian people. And to my, I guess, to my apathy, it's not real. Like Netanyahu was just in the White House, like he was greeted by Trump. Trump was fixing his chair, like literally there's a video of Trump fixing Netanyahu's chair and almost like patting him on the back while he signed for like infinite budget support from the government of the US. And I was reading at the same time a book from a neuropsychologist called Nicholas Carr that was a top book from the 2024. And this guy, Nicholas Carr, was relying heavily on Marshall McLuhan, which is like, I think you guys know more about Marshall than I do, like a Canadian philosopher that's studying the relationship between humanity, sociology, and the medium. And there's a couple of takes from this book mixing neuropsychology and Marshall McLuhan, which I found really interesting to explain our apathy to the suffering of people and to the way we relate to media. Okay, and why media is the only true language today, or media is the only potential source of truth, direction, and rationality. That the rationality is within media. And Marshall McLuhan famously said this, probably the one quote that everybody remembers, is that the medium is the message. And the take that the book gives on this notion that the medium is the message is because the message of the medium is not important. Is the media, is the medium that changes us. Because it mediates our relation to the world. Is through media we are related to the world. And what does the internet, digital media, the algorithm, and today the cell phone, like the smartphones and social media do to us as persons, as humans? Okay, so a very, very, very specific point that I want to focus on is cognitive load. Because in a way, one fact is that we are bombarded by information in a speed, intensity, and diversity that is new to this era. Like before, like you could not carry a TV on your pocket and just like suddenly come across a spectacular TV show that was going on. But today you get notifications, you get pulled back into digital media all the time. So, and when you open it, like the density, complexity, and profundity of the medium is something we have never seen before. So you have hyperlinks and hyperclicks to every word. You are provided with videos, clickbait, sounds, and everything is designed to trigger your attention. Even the choice of colors, the size of the font, everything is designed to be like as engaging as possible. Okay. And this neuropsychologist, he's arguing that our main problem is not the content of the media, but as Marshall McLuhan said, the media itself is the message. And today we suffer from cognitive load. And a very basic explanation of how we develop empathy or even moral judgment is that higher level emotions that include empathy, apathy, or like compassion, or like love or understanding, those are higher degree emotions that take more time for somebody to actually develop. And because of cognitive load, something that is being undermined by media is that clicks are more important than morals. So the medium itself is designed towards hyper interaction, hyper speed, and hyper connectivity. And those things are physically antagonistic with empathy. So what in a way, what this helps me understand, or what it helped me understand, or the thesis I want to present to you guys, is that the fact that the media is designed towards the maximization of clicks and engagement doesn't allow time for people to develop higher level emotions. And in a way, we have more access to the suffering of others, but we just don't have the time because there's too many cool stuff going on. There's too many things to click. So I don't have time to care. It's not even that I care or I don't care or my ideology care or that I belong or no, I don't have time for it. Because by the few minutes that it will take you to empathize with the suffering of the Palestinian people, you are already entangled in a web of these, simulated or like hyper reality that is just like taking you everywhere and you're dispersed everywhere. A meteor may crash in Earth in 2032, and we're just letting know that there's a 1.5% that is going to be the end of the world, and they're hiring the WWE specialists to become a consultant in healthcare. Like, we don't have time to empathize. So what I wanted to present is, how does this relate to dialectical materialism? And it's
Okay, I'm cutting you off. Bye.
So much? Yeah, you're distracted already. So
as soon as you say dialectical materialism, you're elaborating from an outside position. But I want to deal with your outside position first, if I may. Because if this were true, then the problem would have started with social media, which is under 20 years old. But all of these people who are being hired as the ratings specialists and the aspects of the new Trump regime precede that kind of media. They precede clicks. Marshall McLuhan was writing in the 60s before there was any such thing as clicks.
Yeah. He was talking about the media before.
So how do you fit those two?
But isn't he just
together?
saying it's gotten worse because of all the things that he talked about are just worse?
Yeah, he was a prophet, man. Come on, he could see the future. The global village.
You don't see a relation? You don't see an acceleration of this idea that the medium itself is changing us?
No, I don't. I do not associate any of the problems that exist with
the existence of the medium.
With anything that happened in the last 20 years. I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. I'm just saying if we're going to assign blame to something,
it's not technology.
Smartphones is what the New Yorker thinks is the problem. That's not what I think is the problem.
I mean, I think it's part of the problem.
You're not a technological determinist then, which is good.
Well, they're going to say that Trump did it, or individualism did it, or the smartphone did it. These are the three easy assignments of blame, and I think it's a lot older than that.
I mean, I think it's both, but I agree that it's older. Like I've said for a long time on the podcast that, we got to look in the mirror in a little bit.
Like, for example, the smartphone enabled a different response to the Palestinian genocide than would ever have existed 20 years ago. Way more of a response. Because there's been like them dropping bombs there every 10 years or so. But this was the biggest response, and they almost banned TikTok because of it.
Yeah, but it haven't stopped, and now they're going into the West Bank.
Yeah, but I don't know that it stifled empathy. I think it increased empathy because you get those images like unfiltered.
Well, one of McLuhan's points is that we're moving back into this acoustic space of simultaneity, and we're moving away from print culture, which is very visual and linear, right? It's not acoustic. Like he'll say, tribal man lived in a very immediate space of acoustic and spatial awareness where things are happening simultaneously, and most of your interactions are face-to-face. And after the Gutenberg revolution, we entered into a print culture where things became linear and precise, and we used valued rationality and that sort of what Diego was saying, that sort of ability to step back and quietly contemplate something before we have to react to it. We can plan. And now today we're moving back. Digital technology is moving us back towards an acoustic kind of space of the ancient tribal man, where things again are happening simultaneity and
rumor.
Instant reaction. The difference between news and rumor and all other kinds of ways you'd categorize information under the print culture mentality is kind of, they're all falling away, and we're entering back into
that's
in a
that's
new
interesting
form. That's his kind of theory, right? And that set off a bunch of scholarship afterwards. But
I even remember the perfect example is the reaction to the plane crash, where they started blaming DEI like before any of the facts were out, right? It's because like people online need to have like a take on it right away. It's like these instant reactions.
Get your explanation out there before the facts have even arrived, right? Because again, it's just about clicks. It's about interactions with people. It's not about sort of arguing out and getting to the bottom of something. It's about, just getting your face out there, getting ahead of things, getting noticed.
I just want to have your take on these pills. So you don't think we are changed by technology, or are we?
That's an insanely broad question, and the answer is of course. I just don't
Marx
agree.
already
Elaborate.
said that kind of thing. We change the world around us and thereby change ourselves.
I know Marshall McLuhan pretty
Technologies.
well. One of my committee members was like his direct student. She studied right under him. But again, he is so quick, just like the New Yorker is. We're divided. We're polarized. It's because of cell phones. But an alternative explanation. He talks about like print media.
Yeah.
And he divides like the newspaper. The way he talks about the newspaper is kind of the way we talk about the social media. You have to react quickly. It comes every day. You have to read it quickly, and then there's new information always on its way.
Yeah, as Plato talking Phaedro against books.
Yeah, there you go. If you want to go back to Phaedrus, it's 2,000-year-old debate saying
No, yeah, but I
books.
understand the direction. But what is I didn't understand your criticism then.
Oh, that you can't just point and go, oh, I found the cause. It's right there. It's the thing that everybody has. This is why the world's fucked up.
Yeah, the specific argument was that we have less time for sympathy since we have cognitive load.
Okay, what do you do with the fact that way more, especially young people, sided with Palestine than in any of the previous Israelis killing Palestine conflicts?
Yeah, but like the difference is that probably most of these people, like you judge, they sympathize with them was like what, sharing a story, like commenting online, or like do we compare like the sitting in front of universities versus May of '68 in France?
Yeah, but that didn't happen in 2014. The first time I heard about Israel-Palestine was like 2008 when they were dropping bombs over the wall. There was no public support. It was like, well, Israel, they're good. I think like the opposite seems to have happened in this case, but I don't necessarily want to get bogged down in.
Yeah, and I don't equate public support to actual sympathy, to actual empathy.
Well, they're kids that are watching TikTok. They feel empathy, otherwise they wouldn't be posting about it.
Yeah, there's a difficult question here about what we also mean by empathy, because I think I was recently working on a paper about phenomenology and empathy in politics too, and I think also there's a way in which you can think of empathy as requiring a kind of immediacy to like the embodiment of the person, that you need to see their gestures. Otherwise, it's something else. It's some kind of like an intellectual exercise where you're kind of like imagining, oh, what would it be like to be this person? Which is kind of different than like if you see someone stub their toe and it's your buddy and you're like, oh shit, you almost feel it, right? There's like an embodied response to it. Mm-hmm. And like, I mean, maybe that's like a separate case than what you're talking about. Like, I think you're actually talking about something different, which is more like what Eric was just talking about, of this kind of like slow down, like process what you heard, think about it, reflect on it, right? Which is different than a kind of like embodied feeling of, oh, wow, that person's in pain. Or like you see someone on the street, like you see a homeless person maybe, and like, it's interesting that we are confronted with them embodied, but we can try to flush them out. But if you see something really sad, I mean, you kind of feel something, compared to if you just hear abstractly on the news. And now we are being so flooded with information that we don't actually have time. If you don't actually have time to stop and reflect and think about it, right? Because you're just like bombarded and you have to kind of make a judgment, and you might fall into tribal lines. And now I do think that, kids on TikTok, they're having some kind of a reaction to it. Some of it is probably thoughtful, but some of it is probably just falling into what they already are predisposed to think. They're just like, well, that's my team. I'm going to be on the, because on campus it's, you're supposed to be pro-Palestine. So that's what I'm going to be. Is it a process of slowing down and reflecting? Maybe I'm sure in some cases it is, but in other cases not. I'm always reminded of, my favorite comedian, Patrice O'Neill, used to have a bit about talking about like, you ever try to give a fuck about the news, right? Like you ever try, and it's like, cause you're so, and it's like, oh, like 50,000 people died. And you're like, no, I'm going to care about this. And he's kind of like, he's like trying to care. And it's like, I can't give a fuck. There's just too much shit. I just don't care. And it's like, and I think that like when you're flooded with so much information, there is something to the idea that it's somehow like an extra effortful step to stop and think about what does this mean for these people, you know?
Well, feeling empathy, I don't know. It's an interesting question because there must be an intellectual component to empathy, because remember McLuhan's other point is that the media constitutes an extension of our nervous system. And when something becomes massively and suddenly extended, it kind of has an opposite reaction. We don't sense more, we
feel
sense less.
Yeah.
We become like, it's that narcissist narcosis thing. Because on the one hand, the extension of the media extensions are an extension of man. So that's the narcissistic element. And then the sudden extension produces a kind of narcotic reflex where we become, anesthetized, right? So it's actually harder to empathize in a way because you have this defense mechanism where, you're in so much pain, right? You go unconscious, right? You have this almost narcosis anesthetizing reaction, right? And we're experiencing this massive extension of our nervous system through the media with the electrification of culture, right? Of information now traveling at the speed of light rather than the speed of people carrying newspapers, right? There'd be a significant delay between event and information, and now event and information are almost simultaneous. You don't there's no room, like Benjamin even makes this point, there's no room between the event and the information for myths, rumors, stories to emerge that explain this event, and then we can later compare those with the information. It all comes in at the same time. Things are explained before they even happen in a certain way. And that situation seems to make us numb to and more difficult to empathize with, the human element in these events, right? So Palestine or any other traumatic, disastrous thing that's going on, right? It's almost like it's very difficult to, sort your feelings out about it. You just react and you compare your reaction to other people. And then you don't logically evaluate that. You look for similarities in your reactions. Oh, this person's reacting the same way. This group of people, maybe I belong to this group of people then. It becomes much more surface level, right? It's just like the transition from radio to television, right? We all know the famous example of the debate on the radio that Nixon wins and the debate on TV that Nixon loses, because he doesn't have that sort of immediate visual presentation of himself that inspires confidence. He's all sweaty and kind of gross and not a very good TV presence. So he loses the debate, not because of what he's saying, but because of the way he's just sort of presented in the immediacy of his image on the television. And so we react to that. We don't react to the information in the sense of what the information is claiming and making arguments and evaluating them. We don't do that. We react emotionally, but it becomes difficult because of that anesthetizing defense mechanism we have.
It could be true. It could not be. I think Marshall McLuhan significantly overrates the form versus the content. And he did that to be provocative because he was a little bit of a provocateur, saying, no, actually only the form matters, not the content. But if we can go a little bit before that, I guess we're doing a media studies podcast today. And maybe we can find out how philosophy died this way. But long before there was Marshall McLuhan, there was someone who's known as the father of public relations. And you may think I'm bringing up Edward Bernays, Freud's nephew, but I'm not, because he was not the original father. The original father was a dude,
Freud.
a dude named Ivy Lee, who initiated or sent out the first press release in history. And it was for the Pennsylvania Railroad Company after there was a giant accident where a train derailed and killed a bunch of people by falling into the river. And it's the first press release, right? So this is why I'm stressing content matters, because Ivy Lee, as the first public relations expert in history, sets off content and he used to write at the New York Times, right? He used to be a journalist. He switches over. Then his clients are steel companies, train companies, the Rockefellers, Standard Oil, and eventually then the Nazi company IG Farben that invented Zyklon B and propagated the Holocaust. But this split of content where you can't trust anything begins in 1905, 1906, somewhere around there, where you can no longer trust what you see as something that's being in the people's interest or the public interest, the public as a mass. Now you can buy, or rich people, capitalists, can buy space in the New York Times just by hiring PR guys to submit the stories to them. Because if you have a story submitted to you, you don't have to do your own research. And if we fast forward, I think this is far more significant than the cell phone. If you fast forward from 1980 to today, in 1980, PR specialists outnumbered journalists by 2-1. And today that ratio is 6-1. So if we're going to talk about why America went schizophrenic, why America is completely schizophrenic, I'm not going to say it's because of the cell phone. I'm going to say it's because you can literally not trust any of the content. Now, form, I'm willing to have that discussion, but when I'm looking at the content of the news, I find that to be far more disturbing than my supposed desire to keep refreshing my phone, which is not actually something that I typically do. Maybe it's the new generation. We can blame them for everything that's going to go wrong. But I think it's gone wrong in 1900 when imaginary America began.
Well, I would only note that, like, McLuhan's opposition between form and content, or for him it would be medium and content. A cell phone would be a medium, just as a car would be a medium, just as the roads that the car drives on would be a medium, just as the power lines and satellites that the cell phone needs to work would be sort of part of that
Genuine question, Eric. Is the cell phone the medium or is internet the medium? Because I think like cell phone is a tool for the medium, but the medium itself is the internet, isn't it? Or am I reading it wrong?
Well, technologies are considered mediums in McLuhan's sense, right? So you look at the cell phone and the internet and all of those sort of auxiliary things as part of the same medium, right? So the medium includes technology.
Conceivably, you could have a phone that wasn't connected to the internet and play solitaire on it all day, and McLuhan would still say that it's an extension of your senses because it stretches your thumb muscle or whatever.
Right, like wearing binoculars or whatever. Yeah.
Just as the first person who wrote down the alphabet and started using it created a new medium, right? For externalizing thought, right? And that's what a cell phone is, also that sort of thing. A medium that externalizes, well, I don't know, thought,
mediates.
But it's connected to our nervous system.
If we can switch, Victor, can you present your thesis on why America went schizo, and we can incorporate this versus that? We're doing hypotheses today.
Yeah, exactly.
Diego, I overstated my point. You're my friend. I'm sorry. I know. But
yeah, you're kind of an asshole.
Go
to be
fuck
honest.
yourself.
I gotta be honest.
I've heard this specific argument. It's cell phones, polarization, Trump so many times, and it drives me insane.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think Diego's
that's a very
offering.
strawman. That's a very strawman way of saying what I said.
I mean,
Well,
I think
then
it's
I
a little bit more
misrecognized
sophisticated.
you.
It's a little bit more sophisticated than that. I think. But I think there's. I mean, I saw both sides. Like I think I saw what Diego was trying to say more than, but I also understood some of the criticisms that you had, and I kind of had my own, which more had to do with an ambiguity about like what do we mean by empathy and stuff. But yeah, I think there's reason to disagree, but I think it's more than just that, just what you said. I think, Pills, respectfully.
I mean, to be fair, when as ensconced as we are or have been in academia and theory, right? You start to get the sense that there's a difference between, what you're looking at now and what's hot in the theory world and what is
Yeah.
like cliched, right? So
Yeah.
like by the 2000s or 2010s, like postmodernism was very cliched and people moved away from it. That is to say it's not still valuable, but people just became tired of it. There's a certain just like exhaustion with a certain kind, like it's like Whitehead said, right? Metaphysics doesn't go away because it's argued, against and like proven to be wrong. It just goes out of fashion, right? And McLuhan sort of immediately was attacked for his theories. And I guess they achieved a certain level of cliche like very quickly. And but I still think it's very valuable to look at it, read what he had to say, because I think it is, if you can get away from that. But sorry, Victor.
Yeah, so I have like a kind of half-baked theory that I've been thinking about. I think for a long time. I think it's come up in the episode when we talked about subversion, and I guess like the concept that I sort of want to try to take a stab at developing is maybe like some kind of critique of what I perceive as like prioritizing a kind of epistemological populism or something like that. That's kind of a term. I don't know if I coined that, but I think that's kind of like a term that I see as sort of pointing to the idea that that like being anti-establishment is better, that there's like an anti-establishment reflex. And I think this happens on all sides, and it's sort of somehow symbolically organizing, and we talked about freedom as being a signifier last week or the week before. And, this isn't really a signifier, because I think the reflex or the pattern that I'm pointing to, I don't think there's one signifier that organizes it, but more like a sentiment that it's like, it's more correct to be against those who hold power, or those who are perceived to hold power, right? The truth of it doesn't really matter. So I think like there's maybe like a prevailing mode of legitimation that is now one of opposition. So everyone seeks to be seen as subversive. And I think, anti-establishment positioning, paradoxically, I think it's no longer the exception, but it's sort of becoming the norm in political rhetoric, that it's like the norm is actually to be like anti-establishment. And I think it shapes not only like rhetoric, but also epistemology. So the ways people claim to know what they know. So in many cases, I think that like the outsider position is assumed to grant privileged access to the truth, or at least it seems that way. And where, kind of what are perceived, again, this is a game of perception, right? What are perceived to be establishment perspectives are seen as somehow inherently compromised or corrupt. So I don't think it's only a right-wing tendency, right? It mirrors aspects of left-wing standpoint epistemology, right? Where marginalized identities are seen as or assumed to have superior knowledge due to their oppression, which I think in a way, we can trace that back to Hegel and the master-slave dialectic, and then the way that Marx took that up. We don't have to get into that. And in both cases, I think, whether it's on the right or the left, positionality is treated as a source of epistemic authority, rather than engagement, some kind of like engagement with what seems right, doing work, I guess. I don't want to hold critical reasoning to some kind of, sacred cow position, but more just like rigor, putting in effort, right? Putting in effort. And I'm going to be agnostic about what that effort entails. And I guess I have two examples that were in the news that I think maybe kind of point to this. So we might, see this dynamic in recent debates around Trump's plan to take over Gaza, right? Turn it into the Gaza strip mall. His suggestion, obviously has been, condemned. I condemn it myself. But then I noticed this kind of like side conversation happening where some commentators criticized leftists who had abstained from voting for Kamala in the last election, arguing that their refusal contributed to Trump's ability to, suggest such crazy policies. However, a segment, I think, has rejected this criticism, insisting that Harris, perceived, again, I think part of it is she's perceived as an establishment figure, would have been no better than Trump. Right. So I think that, maybe we can argue about that, but I guess I see this reaction as illustrating a reluctance to acknowledge that the establishment, while deeply flawed, might have still be comparatively better to some, anti-establishment buffoon like Trump. again, I think it creates this kind of reflex creates an epistemic environment where acknowledging even relative advantages of institutional actors feels like complicity, right? So people want to say, I would never even admit that Kamala is better because then I'm going to be complicit somehow with the establishment. So there's this like performative reflex to just be like, I'm always going to be against this. And then the second example, I was very amused to watch Tucker Carlson's recent debate with Piers Morgan. He kept talking about how he objects to this like moralizing language used by supporters of Ukraine, right? That, it's moral to support Zelensky. And he attempted to reverse the discourse by labeling Zelensky as a dictator, right? Pointing to his decision to delay elections. I guess I actually don't know too much about those details. Maybe Diego or someone
party as well.
Yeah, maybe Diego knows more about that. I don't really care that much about that. But I think what's interesting to me is just more Carlson's rhetorical move. Position support for Ukraine as the establishment stance, right? Thereby opening space for a more sympathetic or at least skeptical stance towards Russia. So I'm not necessarily saying that he's like loves Russia, although it kind of seems like he does. But rather, I think his approach exemplifies how right-wing anti-establishment discourse often functions epistemically. So if the institutional consensus favors Ukraine, then skepticism towards Ukraine becomes the more subversive position. By rejecting the moralization and emphasizing establishment hypocrisy, Carlson can position himself as an outsider with privileged knowledge, right? Someone who sees through the narratives of mainstream discourse. And I guess, and I think this kind of mirrors the stuff I was talking about with standpoint epistemology, right? Where, the rights version sees anti-establishment epistemology claims authority from exclusion by elites, right? So it's like elites don't know anything. They're just stuck being elites. We know stuff more because we can see through their nonsense. And I guess this relies on the assumption that the position of the knower determines the truth, right? So the insider is blind or corrupt, while the outsider sees clearly. And I guess I want to be critical of this, right? I want to say that this kind of epistemic populism, right, whether right or left, is that it assumes knowledge derives from who you are rather than how you think or the effort that you put in to kind of like disentangle things. I think the anti-establishment reflex fails to recognize that actually maybe being an insider in the establishment provides access to certain forms of knowledge. So even if it's also full of blind spots, which it is, right? Institutions accumulate information, research, and intelligence that maybe outsiders don't have. This doesn't mean that they're always right, but it does mean that they're often more informed than those without institutional access. So I guess like I want to push back against the idea that that I'm noticing that is maybe connected. Maybe this is just a connection that I'm making up, but at least it's what I'm seeing. That I don't think that being in an outsider or a less privileged position, it does give you a unique perspective that people in more positions of power don't have. But I also think that people in positions of powers or in institutions have information that outsiders don't. So in a way, I'm actually saying that if there's blind spots all around, right? That there's not one privileged. There's perspectives that you can get from being in one or the other. But I think we're making a mistake if we automatically assume that the outsider has special information that we should prioritize over other things, right? Only when it's being used as kind of a hammer to just have this performative stance where everything establishment is wrong.
All right, I'll say my counter position, and I'll try not to be an asshole. But I hate that. I hate that I talk like an asshole. I get impassioned, and then
No, it's okay. I'm happy for you to be an asshole.
No, I'm not going to be an asshole. I just don't think that the establishment position actually exists the way that you're saying it exists.
Well, I don't think either position exists, really.
Like establishment would be what? The New York Times, university professors, and Hillary Clinton?
It's always relative and slippery. I agree. It's not
the state.
But I think both whenever people are making this kind of gesture, this reflex towards being anti-establishment, I mean, they're naming the things that they think are the establishment. And I think they often do it from a perspective of being well, those elites are corrupt, or those are just privileged people who, don't understand, the position of outsiders. And I think that they're kind of using that as a reason to dismiss or not have to think. Basically, it's an excuse, I think, to not make any effort to think about the situation in a more nuanced way.
I think we're analyzing the news, which is not material analysis, and we have to just give our Marxist credentials out there and say, the elite position exists outside of this critique entirely, except for the corporate families that have always owned America. They still own America.
Yeah.
So if you think that Kamala Harris is the elite, you're shooting in the wrong direction. But yeah, I kind of agree with you that I agree while disagreeing with you that anti-establishment politics is the norm. But I also think that the establishment politics doesn't really exist anymore, because politics had to be pretending to be governing. And this is the Democratic Party. The Democrats get in power, they pretend to govern, they don't do anything, but they say, okay, guys, the adults are back in the room. Politics is long over by the time that happens.
And they're obviously helping their donors too on behind the scenes, and they're actually helping the powerful people. But so is everyone. They
defend the status quo, and they throw a few more crumbs and then say, also, you have to be woke.
Yeah.
But I think that the Kamala is brat is equally as, I don't know, it's its own cult of belief. And the way that you have to picture America is just fiefdoms rather than establishment versus people.
I totally agree. Actually, it's more just like an observation about the way the rhetoric online and the way the rhetoric in the news right now in political rhetoric. I mean, it's all full of mystification and nonsense, but I think that there is like an instinct or a reflex, no matter what position you're in, to try to position yourself as being against something that is more powerful. And I think that that's like, and I think that in some cases it's truer than other cases, but I just think it can be really lazy, and it irritates me.
I think Pills is right to point to Marxist credentials here. I don't know if you know
said that for you. I knew you'd like that.
Yeah, thank you. I think an interesting addendum to Victor's story too is that, recently Trump threatened to withhold all support to Ukraine unless Zelensky gives privileged access to U.S. companies to their rare minerals, right? And Zelensky agreed. He was saying, okay, continued support, giving U.S. companies access to rare minerals within UK territory. Okay, so there's capitalism in action, right? Like,
yep.
What else is it? I don't understand that. This is just capitalism coming out of its pupa shell of all the welfare state bullshit, checks and balances that are imposed on it, and just coming into its own. That's what it's doing. It's shaking off. It's overcoming those barriers, and Trump is delivering on that, right? He's allowing a free market, libertarian kind of mentality so no more spending money on foreign aid, right? Shut down all those foreign aid agencies, right? Get rid of the state. That's not capitalist, having this huge state. Why would you have this huge state when you can just have a free market decide everything, privatize education and hand over all the information to Elon Musk and let him deal with it. He's a private actor. He's a businessman. He's going to be able to monetize these things, and the market will redistribute all the value in the way to like that. This is what is happening, I think, is that we're just moving away even further from the welfare state. We thought it was done, but it's actually, there's still a lot of kind of non-capitalist mechanisms out there, and they're just being identified and eliminated.
It's the billionaire welfare state, because Elon Musk pretending to be anti-establishment when almost all of his wealth from carbon credit or whatever the electricity car credits are, to being like the funder of SpaceX is the United States government. And this guy comes out and he gets to be anti-establishment. And it's true. This is my worry about it. Not that it's not true, that it's true that he gets to be anti-establishment while being pumped full of state money. It's
100%.
Yeah, and I think what Victor's identifying the sort of rhetorical dynamics of this shift and the phenomenological, because the rhetoric is the thing that you see and feel and respond to, and that's what Victor's getting into.
The perceived value of like that somehow like the, you know, the ideology, like the way that everyone wants to be free, right? Like freedom. I think like we're moving towards this moment where like everyone wants to be anti-establishment, right? No one wants to be like, oh, I'm part of the establishment. Everyone wants to be like, no, I'm breaking something down. And like, that's the shift that I'm interested in. What, like noticing it and just being like, it's funny. And the way that I think I'm also interested in like the phenomenological, as Eric said, or like the more individual level of like how that leads people to be lazy. Like, because they're just like, well, I'm just this way, and they put things into these boxes, which I entirely agree are bullshit, right? Like there's so much more. And Trump is pretending to be this populist, right? Anti-establishment, but exactly. He's obviously there for corporate greed and the donors and all that shit just as much, if not more than a lot of these Democrats were, but it's all about the rhetorical positioning and the way the values shift. And I think, and at the individual level, I guess I'm always just interested in the way that, you know, even people, the way people are seduced into this dynamic of wanting to be against the system and how it can kind of short circuit our way. And I think the thing that I'm really calling for is that, you know, and maybe this is one of the things that I think philosophy can be good for, is trying to develop some kind of epistemic humility, right? That like, you know, I don't think any position necessarily grants automatic access to truth or, you know, makes you, it's always situational. It's always, you know, you have to be careful and not let yourself think that, oh, well, like, cause I think that the thing that I have in mind is just like, cause what it allows is when you say, oh, well, that person's just establishment. Oh, the New York Times, bullshit. Like, automatically just saying that that's wrong because it comes from that source, right? That's the kind of like laziness that I think gets under my gets under my skin a little bit.
But you still have a standard of truth because you were comfortable enough declaring that Trump is a liar and Musk is a liar.
Yeah.
So you're still you still believe in philosophy.
I guess so.
This makes you a philosophy cultist.
Well, I mean, but don't you agree though? Like, aren't we all talking? Like, it's not just me. I mean, Eric was just pointing out and being like, look at that.
This is what I said in my intro is the distinction that I can't make anymore because Trump is not performing one of the most powerful people in the world. He is the most powerful person in the world. And he's an idiot with respect to everything except ratings. That's the thing that he knows far better than I will ever in my life.
And, you know, I will say, like, the one thing that I saw online about the reactions to the Gaza stuff was like, you know, I do think that there are like maybe a lot of people who were like, I at least it doesn't seem to me that his followers are so, I don't know. I want to be careful about how I say this, but like, I don't think it's not like every single one of his supporters is just blindly following. Like, I actually noticed a lot of MAGA people being pretty mad at him and being like, what the fuck? I don't want to spend money on Israel. I don't want to spend money on Gaza. Like, that's bullshit.
That's where you draw the line.
Yeah. Well, what it made me think of too is like during COVID, Fauci, right? He's clearly like an establishment expert, and there was a lot of pushback against his policies. He was proposing masking and social distancing, and then the research starts to come in. Is masking really all that effective? Well, yeah. Is social distancing really all that effective? Well, not really. But they propounded those policies anyway. And he's an expert. He has the epistemic positionality that we should trust him because he's the public health guy.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, then there's the partisan angle, right, where he's sort of beholden to the Democratic Party because they were in power at the time. And so, you know, you can undermine trust in him and be making a political point at the same time, which is useful if you're a Republican and you don't like the Democrats. But yeah.
Wasn't Fauci implied in the latest WikiLeaks connected to USAID?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, so one of the things, Dodge, the Department of Government Efficiency under Musk's guidance, it's insane. One of the things Dodge did under Trump's guidance is that they dismantled USAID, and now, like, especially because the influence in USAID in my region of the world, it's amazing, it's disgusting. They're fucking everywhere. So I was reviewing yesterday all the WikiLeaks files that came out of the people that was receiving money from USAID, and Fauci was one of them. And he's heavily implied into the creation of these labs in Wuhan in 2019. It's just like it's a hellhole. Like, once you start like pulling that thread, it never ends. But a lot of things came out. Like, for example, the guy, a famous newspaper journalist, if we can still say journalist, from Ecuador, wrote a piece on Julian Assange a while back when he was being protected in the embassy of Ecuador while being persecuted by the US. And most of the guys that wrote for New York Times against Julian Assange, now we can actually see the receipt where they receive money from USAID. Like, each article was paid like $60,000 for people to speak against Julian Assange.
Mm. Yeah, the Doge, the dirty oligarchs grab everything department.
That's a better acronym.
That's good. I
Yeah.
like that.
Isn't the purpose here just to destroy the federal state, like, as much as possible?
I mean,
With
they're
Dodge?
trying to, I think.
Or with this government under Trump, you mean?
Well,
Yeah,
and you'll see if those separations of the branches can hold it back.
No,
you know?
I don't think they're really libertarian. Like
No,
they
I
don't
don't
even
think so
care
either,
about
actually.
ideology. It's just like they're enriching other friends. Like, whoever is in power in turn is enriching their friends and is doing whatever benefit them the most. Like, we have a different set of people that is going to get rich. I mean, as long as you bet on Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio, you're going to do great. Like, you don't even need to be a Democrat or a Republican. Just bet on whatever share Nancy Pelosi is buying. That's it.
This is something that I don't know anything about, but it's probably where all of the answers are. But instead, we're dealing with media studies.
Well, I was thinking that moving forward, we've been looking at the news and thinking about the media in general, and at least the content of it. Let's say we're going to put the medium aside for a second. Sorry, McLuhan. I think what we're going to see, as my little Doge joke, which I got off the news, I didn't create that acronym.
That was smart.
It's the word oligarchy, right? We're going to see if maybe, I predict we probably will see these claims moving forward from the liberal media, is that what we're moving towards is an oligarchy, right? And I think that's an interesting thing to think critically about. Is that okay? So what have we been in? What's form of archy have we been in so far? Has it been an oligarchy? Has it been or is it a crassy? Is it a technocracy? Is it a democracy? What have we been in?
I think this is actually where I just look back. I think back to the Greeks. I think about Plato and Aristotle, and sometimes I'm just like, God, they were right about like the way that the cookie crumbles when it comes to political regimes. Because
the cycles.
Like, actually, I would say that we've been in an oligarchy, okay, and then what happens is that the people get frustrated and mad about the oligarchy, and they get tired of it. So then they try to take over. They have like a populist revolt. But then, well, guess what happens? They just end up bringing in a strong
demagogues,
man, and then it becomes a tyranny,
authoritarian. And then authoritarian unrest leads to the next thing, and it's like a cycle.
So it's just that classic Greek cycle, I think.
I don't like the Varoufakis take on techno-feudalism, and I think this is scapegoating capitalism. Like, I don't think is that different. Like, why would you justify the differences? The amount of money they have amassed? Because today it's true that the best way to get rich is to work with the state. Like, via the manipulation of power asymmetries is where you get rich faster. Just like Trump, just like a lot of like these oligarchs that we're calling right now, is nothing like, it's just capitalism instrumentalizing the state for their own proliferation reasons. Like, in a way, it's weird because what is meaningful here is not what people want or why people explain why they do it. It's the logic is not in human behavior, according to me.
I think it's in human belief, though, because we see belief. Now you can believe literally whatever you want, that America is run by satanic pedophiles, or the Russians, or the Christo-fascists are coming for you, or Curtis Yarvin is a genius puppet master controlling everything. Whatever brings you comfort means that someone is there in control. And it's never who is in control, because there's no faith in...
Yeah, I agree.
There's no faith in institutions for good reason, because they always... Sorry, I'm being superlative. They often lie. The Iraq War, they lie.
Bullshit.
2008, they don't punish the people responsible who are probably criminally liable for what happened in 2008 and had effects everywhere. So if you
100%.
you just give a vote against whatever the current totem is, I think the current totem was Obama, basically. I think Obama was the last bastion of America as a belief project.
Yeah, that's actually totally consistent, I think, with what I was saying. Like, I think, and I'm not saying that you're saying it's not consistent, but like,
No,
I agree with you. I
agreeing
think
with
that's like, that I think profoundly that like fits exactly, because I do think that there's this shifting back and forth. And yeah, I mean, and it starts from exactly, like, I think you're right that institutions have let us down so many times. And then it's no wonder that people just end up overcorrecting, right? And now that, like, because the mainstream media, for example, has been wrong and has lied before, now people are just trusting Tim Pool online or one of these fucking idiots, right? And they're seeing them as like always trustworthy, right? And the mainstream media, so there's like an overcorrection happening.
Do we even believe that voting matters?
I think it matters. It matters.
I
It
don't
matters
think so,
marginally.
I don't think voting matters. Like, to be honest, like to build on to the point,
Well,
I
what do you
don't
mean
really
by
think
that?
it makes a difference if you vote Republican or Democrat at all. Like, I really don't think so. It probably there's a marginal difference for some groups that will benefit out of the decision, but mostly, and I'm gonna say, I haven't said it today, to the material reality of most common people, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change. Like Bill said, like minimum salary is stagnant. Like your lifestyle is fucked up. Like you're still in debt. You cannot afford rent.
It doesn't matter
really
to the
think it
fundamental structure. But it matters. It matters. I think like, you know, one of my examples was about like the Kamala Harris thing. Like, I mean, I didn't like Kamala Harris that much. I didn't think she was a good candidate. I don't like the Democrats in general. I think they're pretty bad, but like, would it have been better right now? Like for the Gaza I mean, I think it would have been slightly better if Kamala was in power than Trump.
For Gaza?
Yeah.
Are you insane? Of course not. It's actually the contrary.
Isn't he talking about taking it over and just letting the Israelis take it over? That seems way worse.
No. I'm not talking about talking. I don't care about talking. I'm talking about how much money went into it.
Yeah, I feel like Biden kind of proved already that it wouldn't make much difference. Okay, the point I want to make about the oligarchy thing, it is, you know, we talked about that ancient Greek cycle of politics, right? Their theories about it, right? And Greeks were having the same sort of discussion, democracy, oligarchy, tyranny, all that sort of stuff. But their capitalist credentials, Marxist credentials, they were in a slaveholding society, right? Where at one point the population of Athens was like 40% slaves, right? We don't have that anymore. We still have slavery, both sexual and labor oriented, of course, but I don't think 40% is the right number for that anymore. We have the capitalist mode of production now. So we have these forms still recurring: oligarchy, democracy, not so much monarchy anymore, a little bit of tyranny, though, actually a lot of tyranny. We have these same sorts of forms, but on a completely different mode of production of livelihoods and social relationships and all of that stuff that commodity production and capitalism bring with it, right? And so the rhetoric we're going to hear moving forward is going to tap into that old, deeply held belief, you know, voting and democracy are so connected, right? And now we're losing faith in voting and therefore into democracy, right? And we're going to hear these cries about oligarchy. But what's the difference between a capitalist oligarchy and an oligarchy in ancient Greece,
or
slaveholding society, or a feudal kind of? I don't know if you can say that. Were there feudal oligarchies? I'm not entirely sure.
Like in the process of transition, probably.
and then deflate. I don't have the answer to that question of what the difference is between a capitalist oligarchy and other kinds of oligarchies. But that's the rhetoric we're going to hear moving forward is, oh my God, Trump, like anyone opposition to Trump. So like maybe the Democrats who aren't going to capitulate, which some of them already are, they're going to say, oh my God, we're moving away from democracy into an oligarchy. And now, does that matter quite as much as talking about capitalism and what's going on with capitalism? Like I said, capitalism is shedding these barriers that had existed, right? So, now we can send Ukraine weapons, not out of charity or moral righteousness, but just because they're going to give us access to their minerals. We can send weapons to Israel now, not out of moral support for the Jewish diaspora, but so we can have a nice tourist destination in the Middle East someday for our oligarchs to visit, right? So what's the difference? What's the difference there, right? And people aren't listening to what Plato are saying, but today with the news, we are listening to what the politicians and the news organizations are saying. So that's what's going to make the difference. Like, right? Do you believe in this narrative about moving away from democracy towards oligarchy? Or do you believe in the friendly narrative of like draining the swamp and making the government more efficient and moving away from this moralistic woke ideology and moving into a more, free and society where you can say whatever you want and think whatever you want and follow whatever religion you want, right? Those are the two competing narratives. And they're both fucking complete bullshit. And the real narrative is that this is late capitalism and these are things that are happening. And those are the kinds of beliefs people have, and they're clashing right now.
They're changing the TV show, and the TV shows are fighting for ratings. But the same people still own the TV station.
TV stations.
That always we're watching a different show. That's it. But that's boring to say. How do we make a podcast about material conditions?
Yeah, like for example, Aristotle is the one that said like you can have the government of one, the government of few, and the government of all, right? Like those are the three like most simplistic syllogism.
On his, there's six. There's exactly so there's six regimes, but they're all two are ruled by one, two are ruled by few, and two are ruled by the many.
By all. Okay, I'm going to propose a new set. There's a government of system where there is rule by none. Like this is still humanism. Like placing somebody in control is still humanism. Like if we get a post-humanist analysis of what is happening, who is in control is the algorithm. Like the necessity of the media itself is self-replication. It's autopoietic in the sense that it's a matter of promoting the most amount of time in device and promoting the most amount of clicks. And that logic doesn't really involve morals or ethics or ideologies or politics. Like I think all the cult that it comes after, it doesn't necessarily come to shape the way politics works.
Well, I mean, I still think that you could argue that the algorithms are benefiting someone, right? A group of people, right? And I think that like ultimately others, like these regimes that they talk about, right? The distinction between the two sets of three, right? Is that like one is oriented toward the common good. That's why kingship is like a good version of tyranny. Tyranny is like where you have the one ruler who's just there to enrich himself, right? And is not interested in the common good. Whereas the kingship is a version of rule by one where it's interested in the common good. And I think like, even with algorithms or whatever, it's like you have these tech entrepreneurs or whatever, these tech billionaires, and they've deployed these algorithms but they're ultimately there to benefit their bottom line, right, themselves. And that's why it's always funny to hear those stories of, those tech billionaires who don't let their kids have cell phones because they know how fucking horrible they are, right?
Don't blame cell phones. Pills is going to hold it against you.
Well, everything from now on, who's going to get their show on the TV?
Well, that's why, that's actually why, like, I think Diego...
Sorry.
Well, Diego has a point, though, about, like, Trump. I mean, I know I'm going to get so much shit for saying that things would have been better under Kamala for Gaza. Like, I already know I'm going to get so much shit for that, but whatever, bring it on, assholes. I ultimately think, like,
We'll
but
see.
you do have
Deep inside, I hope you're right, Victor.
I've been siding with Victor lately, but I think he's probably right on that because Trump will literally say to Netanyahu, "Do whatever you want," and Kamala would have had at least pretended to keep up appearances because she's a simulationist politician.
So let me just finish what I was saying though quickly, where
Sorry.
I actually think that Diego does have a good point though, is like, I think you're like, because Trump is so sensitive to the ratings, right? I'm putting that in scare quotes, right? Like ratings, that like if he proposes things and like, because Diego earlier, you said, well, that's just talk, right? It's like talk is not the same as action, right? What's he actually going to do? And I think that there's actually like, even though I still have a hunch that it would have been better, there's also a pretty good chance that like Trump just bullshits, says stuff, and then he gets a feel for the ratings, right? And then he's like, oh, if the ratings in this are bad, I'm not going to do it.
And he adjusts.
Right. And he adjusts. So like, and I think
that's
that
true.
and like I said, a lot of his supporters, MAGA people, the MAGA ratings aren't that good on this Gaza proposal. I gotta tell you, like they're not that good.
Not because of empathy, but because they don't want to spend money outside.
It's America first. That's the thing. It's America first. Why are we spending money on overseas shit? They don't care. It's America first.
You know, Sergei Lavrov, the guy that is one of the top actual real ideologues next to Putin, said that this notion that America first, it's exactly like German above all. It's almost like a new verbatim of Germans above all.
Was that from the Nazis or is that something else?
Yes, of course. It's from Hitler.
The first America First in the 1930s was sponsored by American billionaires who had financial investments in Germany and didn't want to go to war because they would destroy their own factories.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Ford.
Nationalism, right? But then they figured out that war is actually very profitable.
Very
and they all
profitable.
jumped onto the other side. But no, the wrench I would throw in that ratings story, though, is to say, okay, but are we, in our analysis, are we fetishizing ratings? Because Trump's statement about Gaza is deeply unpopular and caused a worldwide outcry already. Okay.
But it caused
maybe
clicks.
that's just what the media is feeding me. Maybe that's false, but it sounds like he's going to get pretty bad ratings for that.
Oh, and I don't think he's going to do it. I actually think.
But
more
the
and more.
way
And he
the
doesn't seem to
algorithm-
give a shit about saying things that make his ratings go. But he still
dude, it's not
does it.
about moralizing. If I understand what Pills was trying to say, it's not about moralizing ratings, because the machine doesn't care about if the ratings are good and bad. It doesn't care if you're posting hate or love. So it's just caring about how many clicks you have, because based on the amount of clicks, the algorithm can monetize and can use monetization for proliferation. So in that sense, ratings are supreme, because as long as they are growing, it doesn't matter if the growth is based out of hate and criticism, because growth is still monetizable.
This is what WWF, or I guess it was E. This is what wrestling understood. The husband of the current Secretary of Education was willing to be hated for ratings, and Trump is like, I think, starting with the lowest approval rating of any president ever. Pretty close to that. Like, he's not, but he knows how to get the clicks. And then there's the no news is bad news. And this is the part of McLuhan I'd actually agree with. Any click is better than no click.
Then no click.
Like I was going to mention it before, but I have actually been enjoying like some of these Trump things that he's been saying. Like, well, I loved it when he was asked, for example, he's going to meet with Trudeau. It's like, is there anything that Trudeau could do to like change your mind about the tariffs? And he's like, well, you know, the 51st state thing, you know, I was talking about that. Like, maybe they could become the 51st state. Yeah, he said that. He said, and then also, like, I loved it. Some reporter asked him after that plane crash in Washington, D.C., a reporter was like, yeah, it was like, are you gonna visit the crash site? And he was like, visit it. It's like, what site? He's like, the water. You want me to go swimming?
Yeah, he's just like,
Okay.
I don't know about Mexico, but he can't annex Canada, because even the Trump fans in Canada are the kind of people who like paint a Canadian flag on their garage door. They're like, they're hogs for no reason. They don't want to be a part of America, even if they love it.
Do you know that since this Trump stuff, an interesting new poll came out of Quebec that for the first time in like 70 or 60 years, like a majority of Quebecers say that they're proud to be Canadian, like 58%. So it's like, so it's actually helped to quell like Quebec nationalism, because like this kind of unification against like becoming a 51st state.
So Canada doesn't want Trump. They want a Canadian Trump.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I was going to say about politics changing. I never really got to my hypothesis, but you basically heard it. Reality TV, politics is reality TV more than it's anything that we read in political philosophy. But what is scary to me is that if you look to the future, if politics devolves from power and governing into clickbaiters and ratings warriors, which seems to be the thing that, I mean, we always knew that that's what Trump cared about, but his new cabinet like confirms that in a different way. Even Elon Musk is basically a ratings whore. He's better at that than he is at running his companies. And even he's not very good at that by cheating at video games. But like if we see if this is what politics is, and it's obviously an American phenomenon at the moment. We don't see that much here. We see a few people that kind of lean into it. But if this is what politicians, I should say, not politics, politicians will be from here on, then we're going to get a scarier breed, because most people can't do it. Hillary couldn't do it. Bernie couldn't do it. He was a little closer. Kamala couldn't do it. Most of the Democratic Party can't. But if we just get a politician class of clickbaiting ratings warriors, and it spreads from America like the cancer that it is to our neighboring states, that seems scary to me. And we're lagging right now. Sorry, last point. We're lagging 20 years behind because Dr. Phil, WWE, The Apprentice, even Zuckerberg, these are 15 to 20-year-old
true celebrities.
Clickbait. They're clickbait. They're 20-year-old clickbait. So what happens in the next 15 years? I think a Mr. Beast presidency is far more likely than any of us. Yeah,
Hassan Piker. Yeah.
Okay. I do have a theory that sort of connects to what Pills was just saying. Is that okay? We started out talking about the media and the news media, right? And so, okay, you've all heard the story about, concentration of ownership of media and all of those things, right? And most of the information about the world you get comes from the media, and a lot of it is coming from these large conglomerates that own these news media outlets. Okay,
over 50% of editorial news is written by a PR specialist.
Yeah. So what is a news organization if we're thinking about capitalism, right? We have to look at it in two ways, right? And in one way, it is it produces a commodity that exchanges on the market, right? News. You buy a newspaper, you subscribe to a television network, whatever. And on the other hand, it is also indirectly an economic entity, right? It advertises for other producers to help them generate surplus value as well in their production activities, right? So any news corporation has these sort of two sides. On the one side, it's a private for profit. Of course, there's state-owned media and the different kinds of relationships to commodity production. But okay, let's say private news, corporate-owned news, makes a product, commodity to sell for an exchange value. Well, that's kind of collapsing, right? We know that the media is not really self-sustaining anymore, right? All the independent news is disappearing. And so it seems like their primary source of income is just now sort of indirect, right? It's not so much the product that they're making and selling is generating a massive amounts of profit and adding all this new surplus value to the market. They're just advertising for the big corporations that are doing this, and what are the biggest corporations in the world? Whatever, tech and oil still, right? So the news media, insofar as it is corporate owned and the ownership is very concentrated, is a kind of indirect economic entity that services these other sectors that often they're all tied together. If you've ever read Lenin on Monopoly Capital, right? We know that they all have investments in each other's stuff and they're all connected. All the boards of governors are all just like, it's a revolving door. They all have each other in their phone books and whatnot. Okay. So that's the way we have to look at what a news outlet is it's moving towards this sort of derivative, indirect economic function, right? And so what does that say about the information that you're getting from these organizations? What is the use value? I mean, the use value is purely just like, again, it goes back to performance, right? You know, we read news stories from these corporate media outlets and now we can talk about them, right? That's their use value.
An interesting addendum to your commentary, Eric, is that, for example, one of the main indicators that the FANGs company, the FANGs, Facebook, Amazon, Google, FANGS, like the five top media giants, one of the top indicators that they measure as a KPI, as a key performance indicator, is time on device. Like I've heard this, like from people that work inside these companies, time on device is as important for them as share of market, profitability, rate of margin. And time on device is literally how many hours you spend in front of your computer. As long as time on device is growing, market is growing, and then profitability can grow because the market grows. So that in a way will give us justification of why it doesn't matter if the conversation is against or in favor of the current hegemon or the current establishment. It doesn't really matter because as time on device growth, they can make more money. But then again, it doesn't matter what you're reading. The algorithm will choose you and will advertise to you, regardless of the topic you're talking about. Like you can be, for example, in social media, being a virtual activist in favor of the Palestinian people, and you can get advertisement from Nestle, which is funding Israel. You know, like it doesn't really matter. Like you don't even know you're participating. Like your coercion is no longer a matter of choice or decision or rationality. Like most of these these relationships are completely automated.
Yeah. And so looking at the news and the content of what it's saying and face value and reacting to it is completely missing the point of what is happening historically, how things are developing under this current mode of production, right? Capitalism, right? You could be expressing views that are progressive and also funded by an extremely reactionary organization.
This content itself, it will feed the machine because all the attention we capture is going to be captured towards a mode of capitalization that perpetuates the system itself.
Yeah, and that's the behind our backs aspect of it, right? Like the way value is moving, we don't have control of that.
We knew that when we signed up. This is why I began with reality does not have truth underneath it. Reality has clicks underneath it.
Clicks.
Like look at these non-material.
I say that believing it.
Yeah, right now I think it's very true.
These non-material commodities, these info commodities, are also fueling us, right? We're viewer funded, whatever you could say that. Democracy Now! Has a viewer funded model, right? Other media outlets, the big ones, they have more of like a corporate structure with all the advertising stuff, and like I was saying earlier, right? But we're all on the same issues, right? And and polarization and like widespread discontent is great. Yeah,
it's great.
It is amazing for whatever angle you're coming at those stories from. Doesn't matter if it's progressive or corporate or reactionary. Like it's just great for everybody because it creates all this attention and
which then can be monetized.
This is all stuff I've read on the New Yorker. It's all about attention. Just get clicks. So are we going to get clicks or are we going to follow the New Yorker? Oh, wait, that is following the New Yorker. Anyway.
There's no outside.
There's no way out of it.
This is why we have to enjoy the symptom. There is no outside. So
exactly.
We should do it properly. Why do we only have 12,000 followers on YouTube? Someone's not doing their job on this podcast.
I'm going to stream Marvel Rivals just after this.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not doing that. But you know what makes a lot of capitalists money? Anti-capitalist content.
Yeah. That's the point.
Revolutions on MTV.
It's like the old culture jamming situation in the 80s and 90s, right? Like it's counterculture, but now it's co-opted, right? It's just like Victor was saying earlier, right, about being anti-establishment, right? Like being anti-establishment has been co-opted by the establishment, right? And now it's something you're encouraged to do because it's, it gets views, and since social media has no authority figures, it all just seems like an open forum between equals. Like we can all be anti-establishment together. But what are we really doing? We're feeding data in. We're commodifying ourselves, right? Like the burnout society thing, we're commodifying ourselves now voluntarily by overworking ourselves, engaging with these systems, giving them our data. We're being commodified as the audience, as the viewers, not as human beings, but just as like a bunch of data points that can be sold for as a commodity to whatever marketers who can then feed that back into their market research and do more targeted ads that generate more profits. And that cycle is just, I mean, I guess it's not a new cycle, but it's ongoing. And that's being aware of that is just another way of sort of being critical of the content you're engaging with.
Being aware of that. No, you're going back to like before the episode started. Being aware of that is nothing. Being aware of that makes no difference.
It does though, because if you know that the fact of your clicking on a story is the design of that clickbait title, then maybe you won't click on it.
No,
because
it does not change.
This title is offering some
reality.
revelation to me, but it's not real.
I hope to like head this off with my introduction, but it seems we're still in the same place. Anyway, we're gonna.
I also don't believe having awareness about it changes anything.
It could make a small difference, but not really, probably.
All right, I'm depressed, but I'm gonna go watch some content, and it will make me happy momentarily. So
yeah, go watch. Wait, what is this guy that I Show Speed or something, or Kai Senat? I heard they're great.
What's the guy who's from Canada, the French one? I put him in one of my videos.
Content creator, like a big content creator.
He's like a big streamer. Anyway,
French,
I forget.
Like a Canadian.
No, he talks. He's a Quebecois accent. Anyway, we need to be clippable. Any clip's a good one. Say, look at this dipshit, and then post my face saying something stupid. If you master it, all right, guys.
Just lean into it. Lean into it 100%.
I think when the conversation devolves into half-remembered anecdotes, then that's the best time to clip it.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it was relevant because we were talking about the Quebecois, and we were talking about streamers, and we were talking about attention, and I don't know his name, but I know he's big.
I'm glad we don't know.
He will be the next prime minister.
Is he a gamer?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about. You're talking about that he's got like blonde bleach hair.
Ninja?
No, he's not Ninja, hair, right? Or did he?
Or no, bleach blonde hair. I thought.
XQC.
Yeah.
XQC.
Yeah.
Ayo.
See, ayo. You had to have the Brazilian guy remember the name of the most famous Canadian person alive.
He's not them.
Of course, I'm fucking with you.
We have Jordan Peterson and what's
don't forget about Jordan Peterson
and Marshall McLuhan.
Dear Lord.
And G.A. Cohen, which we got a question about, but we didn't get to. All right.
Cool. We didn't get to any questions, did we?
We didn't do any questions.
Authoritarianly, we'll do it on the next one. We're authoritarianly cutting this off. Thanks, everyone. Diego, I'm sorry that I doused your McLuhan fire.
Absolutely not. I will hold it against you forever. I will never take criticism from a friend. I don't know how to do that.
A whole episode on dialectical materialism next time.
We'll continue the debate. Like, McLuhan is one of those who is simultaneously overrated and underrated, but for different reasons. Anyway, we'll get to it. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone out there. 200, good for us. I wish I felt better about it. Goodbye.
Makes sense to that one.